we now move on to the opening of the general debate under Agenda Item 8. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in accordance with the organization of work of the conference will now begin its general debate under Agenda Item 8. In accordance with the organization of work of the conference contained in Document A/Conf 235/4, statements in the general debate should not exceed 5 minutes. Delegations are reminded that longer versions of their statements can be made available on the conference website.
Comenzando con la lista de oradores del debate general.
Beginning with the list of speakers of the general debate, I now have the honor to invite His Excellency, President of the Oriental Republic of Uruguay, Tabaré Vázquez, to take the floor.
Señor Presidente.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to greet all of you. Allow me to begin this intervention by mentioning two basic reasons why today and among you we feel so happy and we feel at home. The first reason is basically a domestic reason because Argentina and Uruguay, more than being neighbors, are brethren countries. Indeed, that is precisely what we are, Uruguayans and Argentinians. We're brothers. The second reason refers to the character and the aims of this conference, which has rightly been defined as the most representative and important event on cooperation among developing countries to continue moving forward on this path, along which the Buenos Aires Plan of Action is a very important milestone. Now, 40 years and many things have happened since the aforementioned plan was approved by the United Nations Conference on Technical Cooperation among Developing Countries, which was held in this beautiful and brethren city of Buenos Aires in 1978. Now, among these important events is that Argentina, Uruguay, and other countries of this region, who were then governed by cruel dictatorships, have regained their freedom and restored democracy. Now, this is not a minor detail. It's true that in the 40 years since the conference, our countries have adopted policies that promote South-South cooperation, and they've achieved a level of institutional development that has made it possible to develop specific normative frameworks or specific actions and programs, as well as a growing interconnection among the various actors involved. All that is true. However, also true, we've achieved this because we live in freedom and democracy. Freedom and democracy, which are not perfect, nor do they guarantee that everyone is happy, but they can always be improved upon, and they offer dignity to all. Ladies and gentlemen, in spite of the progress that we have achieved, there are still pending tasks in building a comprehensive policy of South-South cooperation. There are also new challenges to achieve this, and among these, the commitments undertaken in the 2030 Agenda, which is the most legitimate, the most sensible, and at the same time, the boldest agenda in today's world. It's legitimate because it was approved in September of 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly, which is the broadest and most representative forum in the world today. It is sensible because to eradicate hunger and poverty, to guarantee a healthy life and an inclusive education, to achieve gender equality, to ensure accessibility to services of water, sanitation, and energy, to promote economic development, just to mention some of the 17 goals and 169 targets. All this is not an issue of ideology. It is a matter of common sense and ethics. And it's also the boldest agenda because while the present contains various possible futures, the Sustainable Development Goals are a vision of the future that we'd like to see, or, which is the same but said in other words, the Sustainable Development Goals is a political program for humankind as a whole, and it is a broad challenge that we need to take up. Therefore, we consider this conference as an excellent opportunity to continue moving forward on various aspects related to South-South cooperation, and in particular, those that refer to its the character of this conference, its strategic goals, and implementation of that cooperation. Because in a world that is increasingly interdependent to confront the various challenges on a global scale, such as climate change, poverty, inequality, non-transmissible diseases, etc., for all this, international cooperation is essential as a vector for solidarity and transformation. Also, and in direct link to aforementioned, we believe that this is a meeting that will allow us to consider a very important and specific issue, and that is the assessment and measurement of development and the graduation of countries. Hence, we during the 73rd session, we would like to simply confirm what our country stated last September. We believe the current criteria are outdated and, in fact, are to the detriment of countries such as Uruguay, which are still developing but need a cooperation that has been redesigned and reorientated to help us achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm talking about technical cooperation, technological cooperation, exchange of knowledge. Ultimately, the agenda is very broad, it's demanding, and we will need to deal with that agenda without, of course, disregarding that international cooperation, although from a renewed perspective, South-South, is of course, very intimately related to the international system in which it is implemented. In a complex and interdependent context, there are various futures that are possible. However, none are perfect, but some are better than others. We need to continue working for the best future possible, a future for all, so that no one is left behind and that we all move forward together. And on this task, you can count on the modest contribution of Uruguay. We have developed various policies, such as the combat against the use of tobacco or national system of caring for our citizens, the transformation of our energy system. All this have led to international interest, and there are areas where Uruguay can share with other countries and contribute to sustainable global development through South-South and triangular cooperation. Also, Uruguay has achieved significant successes in introducing various pilot projects and innovative policies to achieve results in development, which has made it a strategic partner for international cooperation in all its modalities. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, the reality, as you know, is as it is, not as we desire it. To transform and improve reality, it's useless to deny it, or to fight it, or to complain it. We need to acknowledge it, analyze it, and even adapt to it. This conference could be an excellent testimony of our determination to continue improving reality on the basis of South-South and triangular cooperation as a means of effective implementation to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Based on this conviction and on this confidence, I'm here on behalf of my nation, and I would like to extend to you a very warm greeting. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias al señor presidente.
I thank the President of Uruguay, Tabaré Vázquez, for his statement. I now have the honor to invite His Majesty King Mswati III, Head of State of the Kingdom of Eswatini.
Is he coming?
The door.
I hope so.
Your Excellency, President of Argentina, Her Excellency, the President of the General Assembly, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great joy for me to be part of this second United Nations high-level conference on South-South cooperation to deliberate on how developing countries can cooperate in order to be able to implement the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. We wish to thank the President, Government, and the people of Argentina for the warm welcome and hospitality extended to us since our arrival in this beautiful country. The conference has come at an opportunity time since we are left with only 11 years before we reach the target date 2030. The theme role of South-South cooperation and implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, challenges and opportunities is highly appropriate because as developing countries, we shall be able to share the challenges we are faced with in the implementation of these universal goals. During the UN General Assembly in 2015, heads of state and government agreed to implement the SDG in order to achieve a better and sustainable future for all. We must show our commitment to fully address most of the SDGs, especially those relating to food security, clean water, education, health, inequality, jobs, land, and climate change. SDG 1 is all-encompassing and poverty is a cross-cutting issue. Addressing it will have a multiple effect in almost all the other sustainable development goals, ensuring that no one is left behind. We recognize that much has to be done to assist the Global South to have access to affordable, appropriate technologies to propel structural transformation of our world as underscored by the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This will entail working together to undertake beneficiation and value addition on our primary products as this is also the spirit of our regional economic bloc, SADC. Our concerted effort would leverage the competitive edge of the South within the global market and therefore enhance integration of the South into the global economy. Africa is also working towards the Continental Free Trade Area, which will enhance trade between our two regions. Every country and region possesses some unique advantage that needs to be exploited and shared across the global South through the South-South cooperation. Take, for instance, Argentina has made significant growth in its agricultural and ICT industries, and we hope to learn more from their experience in this enhanced and forum. It is imperative that we strive to work together to promote our collective interest within the global South and at the multilateral level, because we share a fundamental goal of poverty, eradication, and sustaining the development we want. Our strategic strength must be stimulated from our solidarity and unity in diversity. A high proportion of economies of the global South are anchored in agriculture, a sector where the main upkeep of the southern population is dependent. In the Kingdom of Eswatini, agriculture is the backbone of our economy. The majority of our people are farmers. We have both subsistence and commercial farmers. The agricultural sector provides a lifeline for many nations and is fundamental in ending hunger and poverty, particularly to the rural populations. It is also an important sector for value addition prospects, thus promoting products and market diversification, as well as industrial development, among others. However, the effects of climate change continue to affect our farmers' production immensely. It is also having devastating effects on human lives, as witnessed with tropical cyclone Idea that has claimed the lives of hundreds of our fellow countrymen in Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. Let us join hands to support initiatives to advert these strategies. We should therefore invest in appropriate technologies and innovations that would lead to increased agricultural productivity at the national, regional, and inter-regional levels in order to produce enough food for ourselves. The global South is endowed with a vibrant demographic dividend of young people that need to be harnessed, supported, and empowered with the appropriate knowledge, skills, and technical know-how that would transform economies of the South. There is a need to create exchange programs for our youth to benefit from experiences from our cooperation. Currently, the Kingdom is encouraging our schools and tertiary institutions to design entrepreneurial curriculum. We believe such modalities will increase opportunities for young people to be competitive in the global job markets of the future, as well as integrate their skills into the global value chain. The integration initiatives concluded by the South continue to strengthen collective action in issues relating to the social, economic, political, cultural, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. Integration has become an important catalyst to regional trade, investment, industrialization, and a stimulant to job creation, innovation, and technology advancement, among others. As developing nations, we need to promote trade amongst ourselves. Mr. President, let me take this opportunity to express Eswatini's profound appreciation to all countries and institutions that have continued to provide a major range of South-South cooperation modalities over the years. The Kingdom of Eswatini received financial support from our friends, the Republic of India, through the United Nations South-South Cooperation Facility to conduct a participatory poverty assessment, which was done in November and December 2018. The outcome of the assessment will feed into policy revision and program development for coming up with new intervention measures. Government takes seriously the poverty challenges and does not want to leave any citizen behind in its development agenda. I am pleased to inform this August Assembly that in July this year, government will be presenting a comprehensive report on the implementation of the SDGs during the high-level forum on sustainable development in New York. We are open to adoption of favorable national policies and regulations to promote cooperation that would leverage the pace towards achieving our national vision 2022, the 2030 UN Agenda, Africa's Agendas 2063, and other emerging global agendas. Thank you. May Almighty God bless us all.
Thank you, Your Majesty. Es el momento ahora.
The time has now come to give the floor to His Excellency, the President of Paraguay, Mario Abdo Benitez.
For Foreign Minister Don Jorge Fori. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, distinguished presidents, Madam President of the United Nations General Assembly, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, 40 years have passed since the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, which was ambitiously designed to promote and implement technical cooperation, which today we call South-South cooperation, highlighting its potential as an inexhaustible source of exchange to learn from each other, build capacities, and ultimately to contribute to our development. Now, to meet again today in this city in order to take stock of the path covered over the past 4 decades, and as a result of this, to recalibrate our efforts and goals in this area. Well, this is an extremely important event, and my country simply couldn't skip such an event. Paraguay is convinced that international cooperation, and in particular South-South cooperation, is meant to play a strategic role in the current international landscape, and it will make it possible to achieve development as guided by the 2030 Agenda, the Addis Ababa Plan of Action on Financing for Development, and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Now, we trust that this multilateral forum is an excellent opportunity to exchange experiences, to learn from each other, to take on responsibilities, and to share resources to move towards the much yearned for sustainable development. The global reality that we are living in more than ever requires us to rely on coordination and international cooperation to tackle the major challenges that humankind confronts. And we as leaders are called upon to resolve some of these challenges: peace and international peace and security, the eradication of poverty and hunger, health care, upholding human rights in full, as well as such challenges as climate change, education for development, migrations, and the scientific, technological, and digital gap. Each country confronts specific challenges in its path towards sustainable development. Among these countries are landlocked developing countries, that, as is the case of Paraguay. The specific geographical location of these countries imposes specific challenges on us. These challenges confirm the theory that the development of a country cannot simply be measured, as I've always stated, simply by its gross domestic product. Rather, it should be contemplated in a much broader approach that considers structural gaps. We consider that international cooperation is the best instrument to build strategic partnerships. In Paraguay, it's a central component of our foreign policy because it has been and continues to be fundamental in the process of developing infrastructure, fostering our economy, and diversifying our trade. Paraguay has developed its own capacities and has designed public policies and systems, and it has moved from being exclusively a recipient of cooperation to being a country that also actively offers cooperation, with a catalog of South-South cooperation that covers 15 different programs, including fishing, organic agriculture, hydroelectric energy, rural tourism, community-based development, human rights, and others. Indeed, it is very satisfying for me to present in this conference, high-level conference, a system of monitoring of recommendations in the area of human rights developed by my country with the title SciMore Plus. This platform was designed to ensure the monitoring, follow-up, and control of state activities related to recommendations received from human rights treaty bodies, and has a network of 70 focal points that cover all state institutions. The system is also aligned with the 2030 Agenda, and it is an important tool to ensure that public policies have a human rights focus. This program also has obtained the support of the United Nations Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights of the United Nations, and also has so far been adopted and embraced by the Dominican Republic, Chile, Uruguay, Argentina, Honduras, Guatemala, and the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, and soon it will be also adopted by Costa Rica. What better opportunity than this conference, ladies and gentlemen delegates, the commemoration of the 40th anniversary of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action. What better opportunity than to examine the growth, increase, and the growing impact of this means of cooperation, whose contribution to development is not yet as tangible as it could be. In conclusion, I would like to express my wish that in a very brief time we'll have a third high-level conference similar to this one to evaluate the results that have been achieved as a consequence of the decisions that we will approve today, and that as a result of that conference, South-South and triangular cooperation will be further consolidated and considered as very effective tools for the development and the well-being of our societies. The transformations underway are irreversible. It is essential to keep working to achieve a more equitable world. We can share our experience and our knowledge and our solidarity based on a number of guiding principles. We have to continue building international relations based on principles, such principles as freedom, democracy, and solidarity. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak here for this wonderful event. I would like to congratulate the President of Argentina and friend Mauricio Macri, and thank Argentina for the excellent organization of this extremely important event, which will no doubt make an important contribution to the development of our nations. I have no doubt. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, President of Paraguay.
Corresponde el turno para de uso de la palabra.
I now give the floor to Her Excellency Kersti Kaljulaid, President of the Republic of Estonia.
I can go ahead. Excellencies, distinguished heads of states and governments, ministers, ladies, gentlemen. Firstly, let me thank Argentina for hosting the second United Nations High-Level Conference on South-South cooperation. Thank you also for a warm welcome here in Buenos Aires. South-South cooperation has just reached an important milestone. 40 years since the Buenos Aires Plan of Action for promoting and implementing technical cooperation among developing countries. At the time, it created a milestone platform for sharing experiences between developing countries. We can even say it was an innovative endeavor at that time, but we have come a long way since 1978. We acknowledge that many countries have similar development concerns, circumstances and contexts, historical, political, economic, environmental and social. Therefore, South-South and triangular cooperation have become an inseparable part of the bigger development cooperation architecture. When it comes to my own country, Estonia, we were a newly independent country in transition just 30 years ago, exactly at the situation many developing countries find themselves today. We were struggling to find our way to create a better future for our people. We are very grateful for our partners and like-minded democracies for all their support they gave us. Learning from others' experiences was useful, But the key to success was finding our own solutions according to our own needs and own challenges. We believe that innovation and digitalization has a crucial role in achieving sustainable development goals more rapidly. This is why Estonia particularly appreciates the reference to the application of ICT within the outcome document of this conference. Of course, there is also another side of digitalization, cybersecurity, that we have to tackle together, all countries together, including in the United Nations and particularly in United Nations Security Council through direct approach to cybersecurity in conflict resolution. Absolutely every country needs to develop solutions that work best in their culture and their society. Estonia has surpassed the status of a country receiving aid, and now we are eager to help. We want to contribute. We work through our development cooperation initiatives, for example, through the Estonian e-Governance Academy that was established in cooperation with UNDP. Together with the UNDP, we develop a practical tool for rapid assessment of digital development needs of individual countries. We appreciate that the UNDP, as a host to the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, will share this knowledge globally. We also cooperate on digitalization regionally, such as through the African Union and together with Australia with the Pacific Island states. We are active bilaterally in a number of Caribbean countries and would like to strengthen regional aspects through close relationship with CARICOM. Partnerships between the government and business sector have been one of the key factors for our success. We learned early on that to allow all sectors to develop, we need to engage with all stakeholders, including civil society, private sector, volunteers, academia, scientific and technological communities, foundations, think tanks, to name a few. To fill the gap between the analysis of the digital and practical implementation, we have found that it is not enough to cooperate and to work only with all the stakeholders. We need to start finding the resources to help countries seeking to leapfrog using digital, to help them to develop quicker. Estonia established the Global Digital Development Foundation just a few days ago. The mission of this foundation is to assist developing countries to establish digital societies. This foundation is open for investments from international organizations, countries, and also private enterprises. And we will promise you all here that to approach this foundation in the future will not be overly bureaucratic. It will be the perfect tool of realizing your digital dreams. Developing countries can seek finances if they want to develop a digital society. Estonia has also, in accordance with our commitment to the Paris Agreement and international climate cooperation, decided to provide €1 million annually until 2020 to SIDS and other developing countries to alleviate the effects of climate change through the use of new technologies and knowledge. From the money we received from the sales of the CO2 quota, Estonia has established an environment investment center, and this has already chosen the first projects to be supported in exporting smart climate and environment-related solutions to developing countries. Let's continue to work together, think together, save our planet together, and work for our people together. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Madam President. Es el turno.
Now, I would like to give the floor His Excellency Vice President of the State Council of China, His Excellency Chunghwa Hu.
His Excellency Mr. Mauricio Macri, President of the Argentine Republic and President of the Conference. Your Excellency, Madam Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces, President of the UN General Assembly, Your Excellency, Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, dear delegates, it's a singular pleasure for me to join all of you in this beautiful city of Buenos Aires on this occasion to discuss a topic of great importance, South-South cooperation. At present, there remains a striking imbalance in development when we look around the world, and developing countries continue to face an uphill struggle in growing their economies and giving their people a better life. Focusing on the opportunities and challenges facing South-South cooperation, this conference is of great significance to sustained and deeper South-South cooperation by pooling the wisdom and strength of all parties. China is a staunch supporter of, an active player in, and an important contributor to South-South cooperation. To date, catering to the needs of different countries, China has provided a total of 166 countries and international organizations with over RMB 400 billion yuan's worth of assistance to help the recipient countries implement more than 5,000 projects and programs in various categories. Last year, China's trade with other developing countries amounted to $1.77 trillion. And our investment in the developing world reached $29.1 billion. In particular, since His Excellency President Xi Jinping attended the UN Sustainable Development Summit in 2015, China has been actively engaged in South-South cooperation through such means as trade, investment and financing, productive capacity cooperation, and training, thus greatly enriching both the agenda and the practice of cooperation. In that process, we have been honoring the very values of South-South cooperation, namely pursuing both the greater good and shared interests and giving precedence to the greater good. China is firmly committed to multilateralism and the multilateral institutional architecture with the UN at the very center. China firmly defends the fundamental principles of South-South cooperation, namely sovereignty, equality, and mutual benefit, and non-interference in other countries' internal affairs. To better develop South-South cooperation, China would like to highlight the following. First, South-South cooperation is a common undertaking of all developing countries. This undertaking is based on equal, mutually beneficial, and win-win relations, and is a product of developing countries' common aspirations and quests for development. When confronted with development challenges, developing countries should actively engage in policy communication, coordinate their positions, and seek common ground while resolving differences to create strong synergy for development. Second, South-South cooperation should expand into more fields. South-South cooperation has a rich agenda, and much can be done in a broad range of areas, including trade, investment, finance, infrastructure, and the environment. Infrastructure connectivity should be further enhanced among countries and cooperation intensified in inter alia, agriculture, energy, science and technology, digital economy, and e-commerce, so that such cooperation can be broadened and deepened continuously. Third, innovative transformation is needed for the modalities of South-South cooperation. In the developing world, national circumstances vary from country to country in many ways. Countries should be encouraged to involve themselves in South-South cooperation in the most suitable manner that befits their endowments, capacities, and levels of development. Trilateral cooperation, public-private partnership, and industrial capacity cooperation should be vigorously promoted by launching a series of highly successful projects that can lead, steer, and inspire. Fourth, South-South cooperation is there to complement, not to substitute, South-North cooperation. In the grand scheme of international development cooperation, South-North cooperation remains the primary channel. So developed countries should honor their ODA commitments in good faith with more tangible actions. As a useful complement to South-North cooperation, South-South cooperation does also have an active role to play. But instead of replicating the principles and criteria of South-North cooperation, it should be grounded in reality and pushed ahead in an independent and flexible manner. Dear delegates, this year marks the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. The past 7 decades has witnessed tremendous achievements in China's development. But the fact remains that China is the world's largest developing country. Today, China ranks below the 70th place in the world in terms of per capita GDP. As at the end of 2018, 16.6 million rural residents in China were still living in poverty. Like the rest of the developing world, China is also confronted with daunting development-related challenges. China's development has benefited from the support and cooperation of the international community. We are also ready to do what we can to the best of our ability to shoulder such responsibilities as commensurate with our stage of development and our actual capacity by working hand in hand with other countries to build a community of shared future for humankind. 1. We shall help more products from fellow developing countries access the Chinese market. China is opening its door wider and wider to the world, providing fellow developing countries with more and more market opportunities. Our zero tariff treatment will continue for imports from the LDCs to encourage them to export more to China. China is ready to actively negotiate and conclude FTAs with other developing countries in a joint endeavor to promote trade liberalization and facilitation. Last year, we successfully held the first China International Import Expo, or CIIE. The second CIIE will take place this year, and again, exhibitors from the LDCs can showcase their products free of charge. We are looking forward to seeing more goods from fellow developing countries on the Chinese market. 2, we shall encourage and expand investment in fellow developing countries. Industrial capacity cooperation between China and other developing countries is yielding positive results. We shall continue to encourage well-positioned and reputable Chinese firms to invest and do business in other developing countries, to enhance cooperation in such areas as infrastructure, clean energy, information communications, and environmental protection, and facilitate the joint creation of trade and economic cooperation zones. We shall follow through in good faith on the commitment made by President Xi Jinping and strive to invest more than $12 billion in the LDCs by 2030. 3, we shall optimize the modalities of assistance to make it more effective. In order to further step up international assistance, the China International Development Cooperation Agency was established last year. Leveraging our advantages, we shall remain focused on such priority sectors as poverty reduction, agriculture, health, infrastructure, skills training, and education, and help ensure that assistance funds are better spent with due attention to financial sustainability. We are happy to share our development experience with the recipient countries, help them improve their people's livelihood, and enhance their self-reliant development capacity in a tangible way. 4, we shall make optimal use of various platforms for multilateral cooperation. China stands ready to work with all parties to actively promote international cooperation under the Belt and Road Initiative and the principle of consultation and cooperation for shared benefits, and give wide scope to the United Nations and various other multilateral and regional cooperation mechanisms. The second Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation will take place in Beijing next month. It is set to inject a fresh impetus into South-South cooperation. Dear delegates, never before have the destinies of all the peoples around the world been so closely linked as they are today. South-South cooperation provides an important solution for developing countries in their joint effort to tackle development challenges. It is a solution with great prospects. We hope that this conference, with the contributions of all participants, will arrive at greater, wider consensus and provide a solid foundation for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I'm confident that the fruits of South-South cooperation will be ever more abundant and the road ahead will be ever broadening. I wish this conference a resounding success. Thank you.
Gracias, señor vicepresidente.
I thank the First Deputy Minister, and I now give the floor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and First Deputy Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia, Ivica Dačić.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset I would like to thank the Argentine Republic for the warm welcome and excellent organization of this important event. It is my great pleasure to have the opportunity to once again visit the country with which the Republic of Serbia has traditionally fostered and maintained excellent relations with full understanding and mutual support on issues of vital importance. It is my honor to address this important UN conference on South-South cooperation, a segment which has over the past 40 years, following the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action in 1978, continuously promoted cooperation and constantly engaged new stakeholders, thus establishing itself as an important factor in the process of promoting political and economic relations, as well as a successful model for international cooperation on sustainable development. Today, more than ever before, the achievement of sustainable development goals on a global level is intertwined with the role and impact of fast-growing economies and the developing countries. I would like to underline that convening of this second high-level UN conference on South-South cooperation is a testimony to the contribution made by the South-South cooperation in terms of the exchange of experience, expertise, and technologies among developing countries, as well as the triangular cooperation including developing countries. The Republic of Serbia has an interest to develop all-round cooperation with the countries participating in the South-South cooperation process. As a country currently in the process of European integration, but also as one of the founders of the non-aligned movement, we are particularly heartened by the development on triangular cooperation on the joint work being done by partners from both developed and developing countries. The Republic of Serbia will continue to strongly advocate for strengthening multilateralism, the UN system, and international solidarity, while respecting at the same time sovereign equality of all member states of the United Nations. I would like to take this opportunity to thank once again many countries which have not recognized the unilateral declaration of independence of so-called Kosovo in support of the preservation of the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the Republic of Serbia. By doing so, they have demonstrated their commitment to the principles of international law, the Charter of the United Nations, and the UN Security Council Resolution 1244. The Republic of Serbia is consistent in its position that contains issues must be resolved only by full compliance with these principles and the documents, and through dialogue aimed at reaching compromise and durable solutions. I am deeply convinced that only consistent and principled positions are a guarantee that the rights of small and less developed countries will be observed in similar circumstances in the future. It is of particular importance that the attention of this conference is focused on the implementation of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, a strategic document, the implementation of which should make the world more just and more human for all. This will once again reaffirm the indispensable role of the United Nations systems as a global forum for dealing with matters and challenges of universal significance, such as the Sustainable Development Goals to which both the developed and developing countries aspire equally. The Republic of Serbia is committed to the implementation of all Sustainable Development Goals, in particular among the young regarding economic growth, enjoyment of full gender equality, and empowerment of women and young girls. Our country is currently undergoing a process of economic reforms aimed at creating durable political and economic stability. Dynamic work on bringing the agenda in line with our priorities, as well as with the chapters in our pre-accession negotiation with the European Union, are extremely important in this process. The Republic of Serbia is ready to join all partners, including the organization and agencies of the UN system, civil society and private sector, in searching for best answers to issues facing the region of Southeast Europe and the international community at large. We are committed to finding solutions to common challenges in our region through cooperation in the protection of the environment, sustainable use of water and energy, promotion of transport infrastructure, agriculture, transfer of technology, trade and investment, innovation, science and information and communication technologies. The Republic of Serbia considers that only on the basis of joint action and peaceful cooperation, which are the fundamental principles characterizing South-South cooperation, the Republic of Serbia and other countries of our region can achieve their common goal of creating a peaceful, stable, sustainable and a prosperous environment. I am confident that this conference will give an important impulse in this direction, and I wish you all success in your full deliberations. Thank you very much.
I thank His Excellency Ivica Dakic, First Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Serbia, for his statement. Now I have the privilege to give the floor to His Excellency Riyad Al-Maliki, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the State of Palestine, and he will speak on behalf of Group of 77 and China. Minister, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm deeply honored and privileged to deliver this statement on behalf of the Group of 77 and China in the opening ceremony of the Second United Nations High-Level Conference on South-South Cooperation. At the outset, I would like to express our profound thanks and appreciation to the government and people of Argentina for hosting this important conference and for warmly welcoming us here in Buenos Aires. 40 years ago, we gathered here in this beautiful city, Buenos Aires, and adopted the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, BAPA, which was the major landmark for the technical cooperation among developing countries. Today, we are gathering here again to review trends, assess progress, review lessons learned, and identify challenges with a view to enhance the current institutional arrangements to effectively support South-South cooperation and promote South-South agenda, and aiming at stepping up South-South cooperation contribution to the ambitious goal of eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, taking advantage of the significant achievements by developing countries. For the past few decades, we have witnessed the expansion of South-South cooperation. evolving at different levels and provided innovative approaches for collective actions and strengthened its contribution to sustainable development in its three dimensions. The group notes with appreciation the expansion of intra- and inter-regional South-South cooperation initiatives and summits that have set strategies and agendas, enhanced policy coordination, and launched joint ventures that have strengthened South-South trade, investment, infrastructure development, and capacity development. The group strongly believes that South-South cooperation offers opportunities and supports our efforts to strengthen international cooperation to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The main multilateral consensus, which reaffirms the global development commitment and calls for complementing national efforts to achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. In this regard, the group emphasizes that South-South cooperation is a complement to and not a substitute for North-South cooperation, which remains the main channel for international development cooperation. We highlight that the principles that have guided South-South cooperation remain valid. And as reiterated by our ministers, the group stresses that South-South cooperation should continue to be guided by the following well-established principles, references, and goals. A, South-South cooperation is a common endeavor of peoples and countries of the South and must be pursued as an expression of South-South solidarity and a strategy for economic independence and self-reliance of the South based on their common objectives and solidarity. B, South-South cooperation and this agenda must be driven by the countries of the South. C, South-South cooperation must not be seen as a replacement of North-South cooperation. Strengthening South-South cooperation must not be a measure of coping with the receding interest of the developed world in assisting developing countries. D, cooperation between countries of the South must not be analyzed and evaluated using the same standards as those used for North-South relations. E, financial contributions from other developing countries should not be seen as official development assistance from these countries to other countries of the South. These are merely expressions of solidarity born out of shared experiences and sympathies. F, South-South cooperation is a development agenda based on premises, conditions, and objectives that are specific to the historic and political context of developing countries and to their needs and expectations. South-South cooperation deserves its own separate and independent promotion. G, South-South cooperation is based on strong, genuine, broad-based partnership and solidarity. H, South-South cooperation is based on complete equality, mutual respect, and mutual benefit. I, South-South cooperation respects national sovereignty in the context of shared responsibility. J, South-South cooperation strives for strengthened multilateralism in the promotion of an action-oriented approach to development challenges. K, South-South cooperation promotes the exchange of best practices and support among developing countries in the common pursuit of their broad development objectives encompassing all development-related aspects of international relations and not just in the traditional economic and technical areas. L, South-South cooperation is based on the collective self-reliance of developing countries. M, South-South cooperation seeks to enable developing countries to play a more active role in international policy and decision-making processes in support of their efforts to achieve sustainable development. And the modalities and mechanisms for promoting South-South cooperation are based on bilateral, sub-regional, regional, and inter-regional cooperation and integration, as well as multilateral cooperation. The group recognizes that BAPA+40 offers the opportunity to have an honest discussion on the importance of advancing the sharing of knowledge and experiences with a view to showcase its contribution to sustainable development. However, this work must be carried out taking into account the particularities of the South-South cooperation and in accordance with national capabilities. The group reiterates that South-South cooperation is built on voluntary and demand-driven nature, lower transaction cost with no conditionality, taking advantage of the similarities and relevant know-how among developing countries, real and proven development expertise valued by the southern countries. Furthermore, South-South cooperation cannot be measured or assessed in the same way as ODA, as its value goes beyond direct and indirect costs. We also emphasize that the spread of South-South cooperation shall not reduce the commitment of developed countries to reach 0.7% of their GNIs as their official development assistance to developing countries. Furthermore, the group would like to recall the importance of triangular cooperation and acknowledges that triangular cooperation is aimed at facilitating, supporting, and enhancing South-South initiatives through the provision of inter alia funding, capacity building, technology transfer, as well as other forms of support at the request of developing countries in line with the principles of South-South cooperation and must be led by the countries of the South. The group emphasizes the pursuit of win-win cooperation for global development on the basis of extensive consultation, joint contribution and shared benefits, which can bring huge gains to all countries and all parts of the world in building a community of shared future for humankind. The group reaffirms the commitment to promote a universal, transparent, rules-based, open, non-discriminatory, inclusive, and equitable multilateral trading system under the World Trade Organization, and are determined to work together to further strengthen the WTO and fight all forms of protectionism. Also, the group recognizes the significant contribution of South-South cooperation in the area of trade and its ability to promote sustainable development among developing countries, and in this regard, we reaffirm the importance of strengthening South-South trade cooperation arrangements, including preferential trade and investment arrangement and the global system of trade preferences among developing countries. In this connection, the relevant United Nations organizations, including UNCTAD, must continue to support developing countries in deepening and enlarging South-South trade integration, regional, sub-regional, and inter-regional economic integration and cooperation arrangements. We encourage the developed countries members that have not yet done so, and developing countries members declaring themselves in a position to do so, to provide duty-free and quota-free market access to all products from all LDCs in line with the World Trade Organization decisions and the ministerial decision on preferential rules of origin for least developed countries agreed at the 9th and 10th the WTO ministerial conferences. The group remains deeply concerned with the increase in the unilateral and protectionist measures that will not only undermine the multilateral trading system, but also will lead to negative impact on access of the developing countries' exports to the global markets. The group understands that the 2030 agenda represents a change of the development paradigm that prevailed in the last decades, since it recognizes that development is much more than economic growth. In that sense, the group recognizes the multidimensional nature of poverty and the social, economic, and environmental dimensions of domestic output and structural gaps at all levels, and further recognizes the need for international development cooperation to include a multidimensional perspective that transcends the use of per capita income as the sole indicator to measure development in order to support all developing countries to achieve sustainable development, while acknowledging the serious and continuous as well as the new and emerging challenges that developing countries face. The group believes that BAPA+40 gives us the opportunity to reaffirm our strong support to the High-Level Committee on South-South Cooperation and to the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, UNOSC. We stress that the office is the articulator of South-South cooperation in the United Nations system. The group appreciates the countries of the South who have stepped up their cooperation with UNOSC, which has also enhanced its role and impact by upscaling it in terms of financial, human, and budgetary resources for the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In closing, the group hopes that BAPA+40 will constitute itself in a multilateral consensus that will allow to boost our South-South cooperation initiatives. Now, with your permission, Mr. President, I will, in my national capacity, deliver a short statement of my country, the State of Palestine. It will be in Arabic. Sayyid al-Rais, Ashab
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, it gives me great pleasure to deliver to you the salutations of the Palestinian people and leadership, and we hope that this important conference would be a success as a further expression of the importance of multilateralism and its legal framework that is based on respect for national sovereignty and cooperation for the good of humanity and mankind. We also would like to express our thanks to the friendly state of Argentina, people and government for hosting this conference as it did 40 years ago with a great spirit of generosity. Ladies and gentlemen, now in 40 years since the Buenos Aires conference has started, which was a landmark in the history of cooperation, we return once again to evaluate this important experience and to determine the challenges and obstacles that stand in the face of our achieving our aspirational goals of sustainable development. Cooperation between the countries of the South has grown and developed, and it was based on some important elements, including a commitment to collective development, enhancing the freedom of humankind, and opposing colonialism, as well as putting equality for living in peace amongst all states. The outcomes of all the development conferences and sustainable development conferences have stressed the difficulty of achieving development under occupation, under colonialization, and we in Palestine are confronting this challenge on a daily basis because of the Israeli colonialist occupation, which has lasted for the past 52 years, and assisting and helping people to overthrow occupation as the biggest obstacle to development, and especially sustainable development, and a major obstacle to people's ability to exercise their right to self-determination, is a duty upon the shoulders of the international community. It is important for the international community to shoulder its responsibility to end Israeli occupation as the biggest obstacle to achieving stability and development in the Middle East as a whole, and specifically for international peace and security as well. Ladies and gentlemen, despite this, the State of Palestine continues to work diligently on entrenching the foundations of the State of Palestine, which is based on laws and international consensus, and enhancing development with friendly states. We affirm the importance of South-South cooperation and North-South cooperation. Therefore, we have founded the Palestinian Agency for International Cooperation, PICA, by a decision made by the Palestinian President as a diplomatic tool and an important element to implement the policy of the Foreign Ministry of Palestine. Through it, the State of Palestine aims to offer development assistance and technical support to states, especially friendly states that support the Palestinian people. And this is based on our belief, our stringent belief in our national responsibility towards these states, and it's an expression of our appreciation for the support that is being given to the State of Palestine from the international community and its agenda. We have made many contributions at the international level in coordinating aid operations and humanitarian assistance and developmental assistance, and in implementing bilateral and trilateral and multilateral cooperation programs in all different fields, especially in education and healthcare and the environment and agriculture. Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, our highest goals of sustainable development in all its dimensions and human rights and enhancing the international multilateral system that is based on international law will not be achieved without taking practical steps, and we should not simply stop at making statements and delivering speeches. Rather, we must put practical plans in order to implement what we agree on, including the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, and we must not leave anyone behind. We are strong in our unity despite our diversity, and the State of Palestine will contribute alongside you to achieve what we agree on in order to serve the highest interest of our planet, of our peoples, and to uphold our joint principles. I thank you, sir, and I apologize for speaking at length.
I thank His Excellency Riyad Al-Maliki, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the State of Palestine, who spoke on behalf of the Group of 77 in China, plus on his own country's platform. Now, before proceeding to the next speaker, I would like to remind delegations of the agreed time limit of 5 minutes. Speakers with longer statements are encouraged to read a shorter version of the text and to submit the full length of the statement to the Secretariat for posting on the conference website. Now I have the privilege to give the floor to His Excellency Manuel Ventura, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica. He will speak on behalf of the like-minded group of countries, supporters of middle-income countries. You have the floor, sir.
Señor Presidente.
Mr. President, Excellencies, I would like to inform you that I will first make Costa Rica's statement in its national capacity and then that of the group of countries, supporters of middle-income countries. Allow me to begin by congratulating yourself and the other members of the Bureau upon your election to lead this important event, and to thank the government of Argentina for their warm hospitality in this beautiful city of Buenos Aires, where today we happily celebrate 40 years of a turning point in the history of what we now know as South-South cooperation, with the approval of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action to promote and realize technical cooperation between developing countries. This was the result of the United Nations Conference on Technical Cooperation between Developing Countries, held in this very city in 1978 to promote this form of cooperation. I also wish to acknowledge the United Nations for the work in organizing this global meeting of unmeasurable projection. My delegation supports the statement the delegation of Palestine made on behalf of the Group of 77 in China, as well as the common position of the member countries of the Central America integration system to be made by the delegation of Guatemala in its role as pro tempore president. Costa Rica is a small country. It is located on the belt of the Americas. It adopted a different way of dealing with its development by abolishing the army in 1949 and by redirecting those resources to the comprehensive development of the country. At present, 8% of the national budget is devoted to education by constitutional mandate, 6% to the judiciary, 9.9% to health. Almost 30% of Costa Rican territory has been declared a national reserve protected by the state. As a happy result of these decisions, in Costa Rica, the Human Development Index has continued to grow since 1980. It is in the high-level category. We are leaders in the promotion and protection of human rights, civil and political rights, economic, social, and cultural rights, environmental rights, and the right to peace. We stress that the indivisible, interdependent, universal rights are intrinsic to those rights and our vision of sustainable development. Many of the strengths we share today with other countries of the South set out in the specialized catalogues on population and development, environment, climate change, childhood and adolescence are related to this accumulation of knowledge and experience implemented in our development model, associated to the Sustainable Development Goals, which are enshrined in Agenda 2030. It is important to stress that this heritage of strength Costa Rica has for South-South cooperation, as well as its experience in the processes to manage this cooperation, has been internationally acknowledged through the trust shown by countries like Spain and Germany, organizations like the European Union and specialized bodies of the United Nations, to convey our know-how, experience, and technical skills to other countries with a lesser or similar relative development, using the triangular cooperation modality, by means of which Costa Rica has linked with countries of Latin America, the Caribbean, and Africa, especially in projects on the environment and climate change. Mr. President, in our region of Latin America, South-South cooperation is increasingly dynamic. It responds to the concentration of a larger number of middle-income countries. The development of the region as a receiver, or rather the movement of the region from the position of a receiver of official development assistance to a set of middle-income countries, and the stress on the management of a modality as both a provider and receiver of international technical cooperation. The focus to measure development fundamentally in terms of income has made so-called middle-income countries, including 109 countries of the South, where 70% of the world population lives, and where there are 73% of the world's poor, have stopped being participants in the major flows for international cooperation. This is a bad sign. It penalizes the development of several nations which have done the work with responsibility, persistence, and transparency, and which should instead generate incentives to stimulate development and cooperation. For this reason, we stress the need to review this methodology and create a broader base to measure this development, such as the use of the concept of multidimensional poverty, the focus on structural gaps proposed by CEPAL, or the assessment of the Human Development Index of the UNDP. Mr. President, one of the main contributions of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is the definition of development through a multidimensional perspective for all countries. It has a cross-cutting narrative of sustainability, inclusion, and equality, and it establishes principles and fundamental values orienting actions for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. The main axis of these principles is focused on humans to whom we owe it as decision makers, leaving no one behind. Common, shared but differentiated responsibilities between developed and developing countries, the interdependence and indivisibility of the Sdgs, and the universality of the commitments made, considering the different realities of all states, their resources and available capacity, as well as their policies and national development priorities, should be our guiding star. In this new paradigm for sustainable development, South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation are an effective means to implement and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. This is what we have recognized together with our partners in multilateral fora, debating development issues, particularly in the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, or CELAC, and in the Ibero-American region. This is where we have built a shared position based on defense of the principles of South-South cooperation. The 10 years of the South-South cooperation reports in Ibero-America document this process. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is an opportunity for South-South cooperation to act as a complement to the work of North-South cooperation to achieve the SDGs. In this vein, South-South cooperation has added value when it comes to contributing to achieving the success of the national frameworks for the SDGs. Specifically, Latin America and the Caribbean have a trove of experience, a compilation of public policy, and a vast background of cooperation, which are substantive inputs for the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. For decades, the countries of the South have had the advantage of working in the areas in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals: education, health, food security, gender equality, access to justice, decent work, water and sanitation, energy, industrialization and innovation, and the fight against climate change, amongst other things. Among the challenges for South-South cooperation related to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, we can specifically identify the following: the drive for regional cooperation to encourage South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. In this vein, regional spaces are a platform and a reference for the dialogue that is to be promoted in the framework of the revitalized World Alliance. The use of institutional frameworks on more inclusive alliances, encouraging dialogue between South-South cooperation and traditional cooperation through triangular cooperation. In particular, this means of cooperation is a complement to the ability to intervene in projects between countries of the South by providing financial and technical resources. Developing multi-stakeholder alliances in the framework of programs and projects for South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation to strengthen the means of implementation for the 2030 Agenda and include practices with innovative strategies. The development of the South-South decentralized cooperation to bring the 2030 Agenda to the territorial level by exchanging knowledge and experience to bolster processes of local development through a focus on the institutions for international cooperation of the state in order to create synergies. The development of a strategic framework for South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation in the sectors of science, technology, and innovation in order to promote progress towards more advanced sectors in the knowledge area, creating incentives for diversifying production and generating quality jobs, sustainable production, and international competitivity. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, Costa Rica is focusing on multilateralism. We celebrate the continued strengthening of multilateralism in the framework of the United Nations with the positive outcome of the negotiations of the document to be adopted by this conference. Costa Rica faithfully believes in sustainable development, in human rights, and in the promise of leaving no one behind. Cooperation and solidarity are indispensable to attain the Sustainable Development Goals. I conclude my statement by expressing the deep gratitude we have to the people and the government of the Republic of Argentina, which has been kind enough to host this important conference and to express our hope that peace and the benefits of sustainable development will reach all of humanity. Thank you very much, sir.
I thank His Excellency Manuel Ventura, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica, for his statement. Now I have the privilege to invite His Excellency Jerome Xavier. Oh. Okay, thank you, sir.
Intervention of the like-minded group of countries, supporters of the middle-income countries. Chair, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the like-minded group of countries, supporters of the middle-income countries, which includes Armenia, Belarus, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Jamaica, Mexico, Panama, and the Philippines. At the outset, we would like to thank the government of Argentina for hosting the second high-level United Nations Conference on South-South Cooperation, which we believe is a privileged space to highlight the valuable contributions of the South in the global efforts to achieve sustainable development. In our view, this conference also represents a landmark opportunity to highlight the progress so far achieved by a great number of developing countries across all regions of the world in effectively implementing our global sustainable development commitments, including those in the framework of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Chair, our group remains committed to supporting all developing countries in their path towards sustainability. We underscore the solidarity of middle-income countries with other developing countries, reflected through the financial, technical, technology transfer, and capacity building support being provided by middle-income countries. In that sense, our group would like to emphasize the importance of knowledge-sharing platforms, such as the High-Level Committee for South-South Cooperation and the pivotal role of South-South and Triangular Cooperation for middle-income countries, who play the double role of providers and recipients of these types of cooperation. International cooperation is still a powerful tool for complementing middle-income countries' efforts to mobilize public resources domestically to achieve sustainable development. Our group is convinced that increased participation of middle-income countries in international cooperation initiative has a multiplying effect that can benefit all developing countries. Chair, we believe that a crucial part of understanding the role of South-South cooperation requires new approaches to the way we measure progress in sustainable development. As we have expressed on many occasions, our group is convinced that economic growth in and of itself is not equivalent to advances towards sustainable development and does not reflect the realities in most of our countries. For example, at all levels of per capita income, developing countries continue to face serious challenges, including obstacles in relation to poverty, eradication, inequality, external debt, and environmental vulnerabilities, among others. Even high-income countries face some of these same challenges. There are, in addition, structural gaps that represent an obstacle to inclusive growth and which impede the development of the developmental prospects in many middle-income countries, such as levels of savings and investments and the quality of affordable public health care and education. Also, improvement in macroeconomic indicators do not necessarily reflect advancements in the eradication of poverty. Given that high levels of inequality or even a rise in inequality remain pervasive in countries classified as middle-income countries, even in those countries with high economic growth. We emphasize the need for South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation to support and improve data collection and analysis of high-quality disaggregated data as important aspects to better understand the multidimensional aspects of poverty for smart and transparent decision-making. Chair, identifying and addressing structural gaps can improve the understanding of development needs of middle-income countries, helping to determine mechanisms capable of attending those gaps in a tailored fashion with higher efficiency and precision. For these reasons, in our view, reconceptualizing the systematic approach to the category of middle-income countries is an urgent matter if we are to accomplish real and long-lasting results in sustainable development worldwide. It is our view that all developing countries would benefit more from decisive action taken on the commitments of the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, which calls for the United Nations to work with international financial institutions in development of transparent measures of progress on sustainable development that go beyond per capita income, recognizing poverty in all its forms, the social, economic, and environmental dimensions, and structural gaps at all levels. It is our view of our group that middle-income countries, and particularly some of the more economically or environmentally vulnerable ones still depends heavily on North-South cooperation. This is why a measure that includes other dimensions of development is greatly needed as a basis to determine official development assistance flows. Also, we commit to strengthening triangular cooperation as a means of bringing relevant experience and expertise to bear in development cooperation. Chair, we would like to conclude by inviting the international community to act promptly to address sustainable development in a more comprehensive manner to everyone, everywhere, leaving no one behind. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank His Excellency Manuel Ventura, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Worship of Costa Rica, who spoke on behalf of the like-minded group of countries, supporters of middle-income countries. Thank you, sir. Now I have the privilege to invite His Excellency Jerome Xavier Walcott, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Barbados. May I urge the distinguished speakers to kindly observe the agreed time limit of 5 minutes. Thank you. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I must first begin by expressing my sincere thanks to the government of Argentina for being such a gracious host, and I commend them for the warmth and excellent hospitality extended to my delegation and me since our arrival in Buenos Aires. I also take this opportunity to thank the government of Argentina for hosting and facilitating the international community on this most important occasion, the 40th anniversary of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action. Mr. President, the Buenos Aires Action Plan has served as a much-needed blueprint for South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation around which developing countries can coalesce. The significance of this second high-level meeting cannot be overstated. As developing countries, we fully recognize that without a firm recommitment to South-South cooperation and a strengthening of our resolve to harness this framework for enhanced collaboration, our nations will continue to struggle to fulfill commitments under the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And this is especially true of small island developing states such as Barbados. Mr. President, over the past few years, we have witnessed changes in the landscape of development assistance and international aid, which in general have not been very beneficial to developing countries. In this changing and challenging environment, it is all the more vital that we leverage our strength as a group to ensure that our voice is heard on all issues of importance to us, and that we exert the weight of our bargaining power in multilateral negotiations. It is my sincere hope that over the next 2 days, we will use this opportunity in accordance with the guidelines captured in our new outcome document to assess progress and to review lessons learned since the adoption of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action in 1978. The theme of this conference bids us to look for opportunities in South-South cooperation in implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. As we work to implement our shared aspiration of eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, reducing inequalities, and protecting the environment, this platform serves a useful purpose in facilitating communication, promoting and strengthening economic integration, and coordinating policies on development issues of relevance to the majority of developing countries. In this context, I urge the international community to put in place a much-needed mechanism to support the establishment of a permanent South-South institution. This institution will bring together global leaders and thinkers from the South to reflect and deliberate on the challenges confronting developing countries and the international community. Mr. President, the government of Barbados notes with appreciation that regional commissions such as the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, have integrated South-South and triangular cooperation into their respective strategic frameworks and other planning instruments. I therefore take this opportunity to thank ECLAC for its ongoing advocacy on regional issues, and particularly for proposing to the international community the structural gap approach as a way to tackle the structural barriers which middle-income countries and small island development states such as Barbados face. ECLAC has consistently joined with Latin America and Caribbean middle-income countries in calling for greater flexibility and broader criteria for determining access to capital, including the use of vulnerability, especially to natural and or climatic disasters, and other indicators that go beyond per capita income, per capita gross domestic product. Sir, permit me to highlight here the SIDS Green Economy Knowledge Transfer Platform in Barbados, which is expected to leverage UN Partnership for Action on the Green Economy Resources to serve as a hub for knowledge exchange and capacity building among SIDS on inclusive green economy principles. Barbados sees the knowledge platform as a tangible contribution to the implementation of paragraph 109 of the Samoa Pathway, which deals with capacity building. This initiative can also serve as a catalyst for scaling up and delivering targeted South-South cooperation interventions for addressing SIDS sustainable development challenges. Mr. President, I must also take this opportunity to recognize the Latin American and Caribbean Initiative for Sustainable Development, also known as ELAC, which has been the basis for cooperation among Latin American and Caribbean countries since its adoption at the 2002 World Summit on Sustainable Development. Governed by the Forum of Ministers of Environment of Latin America and the Caribbean, the ILAC has since been renewed and aligned to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is our belief that the successes and lessons learned from the ILAC can be utilized to inform and strengthen the delivery of country-driven South-South and triangular cooperation programming, particularly in relation to advancing environmental dimensions of the 2030 Agenda. It is with this partnership in mind that I urge the United Nations, even as it undergoes its internal reform process of making itself more fit for purpose, to ensure that it continues to support regional organizations engaged in promotion and execution of transparent, impactful, sustainable, and accountable development practices. I call on the United Nations system and the international community to ensure that the SIDS agenda and supporting institutional mechanisms continue to have the reliable and consistent funding support needed to undergird South-South cooperation within and among SIDS. This was one of the key findings of the 2016 Joint Inspection Unit report on the comprehensive review of the UN system support to SIDS. As a country which has championed the sustainable development of SIDS from its very inception, Barbados reiterates the importance of implementing the recommendations of this JIEU report and the need for support of development partners if this is to become a reality. Mr. President, in closing, I look forward to hearing from and engaging with all member states present at this meeting over the next few days. It is my sincere hope that we will have frank and open discussions that will ultimately lead to the mobilization of adequate resources for enhancing South-South and triangular cooperation. I also use this opportunity to invite you to the Barbados in 2020 when we will host the Forum of Ministers of Environment of Latin America and the Caribbean, another long-standing example of regional cooperation. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Jerome Xavier Walcott, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Barbados, for his statement. Now I have the privilege to request His Excellency Nestor Papalogio Bardales, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Peru. You have the floor, sir.
Buenas tardes con todos ustedes.
A good afternoon to all of you. President of the conference, members of the Bureau, delegates. On behalf of the President of the Republic of Peru, Martín Vizcarra, I would like to express our thanks to the President of the Republic of Argentina and to the United Nations Secretary General for their invitation to this crucial meeting, which will address matters that are of the utmost importance for my country. Our commitment to South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation, which are understood as complementary and not alternative modalities to official development assistance, is reflected in our recently adopted International Technical Cooperation Policy Statement. This establishes as priorities the strengthening of both modalities, and it encompasses the principles of the 2030 Agenda and of effective and efficient cooperation for development and South-South cooperation. Under such priorities, Peru has been participating in more than 100 South-South cooperation projects at a bilateral level as a provider, a receiver, and also in both roles, particularly with various countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. Moreover, we have integrated various triangular cooperation projects. I must also mention as particular progress for Peru the earmarking of internal public resources to carry out South-South cooperation projects. Peru identifies with the view of South-South cooperation that was set out in the Buenos Aires Action Plan of 1978 and in the outcome document of the Nairobi Conference from 2009. This was understood as an expression of solidarity among peoples and countries of the South that contributes to their well-being and their national and collective self-sufficiency, as well as to the achievement of our development goals. At this time, we believe that the new architecture of cooperation for development should have a more holistic, inclusive, predictable, and sustainable approach. This should be an approach that puts the citizen at the heart of our concerns and at the heart of our action. It should take as its main reference point the Sustainable Development Goals in the 2030 Agenda, respecting one of its main principles, which is leaving no one behind. Eradicating poverty in all of its forms and dimensions means that international cooperation and its financing modalities should be guided under the framework of a global partnership for sustainable development towards capacity building and towards technology transfer and the exchange of knowledge and good practices. This new governance should, moreover, promote innovative mechanisms to mobilize national and international resources, both financial and non-financial, public and private. It should further foster synergies among the various development stakeholders, the private sector, academia, civil society, among others. President, as you are well aware, Peru is a country that has achieved sustained economic growth over the last 20 years. As a result of this, we have made headway in social inclusion, with a drastic fall in levels of poverty and extreme poverty. Notwithstanding this, we continue to see structural gaps, latent vulnerabilities, and territorial inequalities that reflect the great challenges faced by countries categorized as middle-income and high-middle-income countries. The 2030 Agenda effectively commits us to leaving no one behind and to address first and foremost those who are most left behind. It's therefore of paramount importance that we recall that more than 2/3 of the poor in the world live in countries categorized as middle income. And that we therefore support the ongoing debate on development that is currently in transition and the need to use a new approach to measure poverty and development, which is not limited to the criteria of graduation or per capita income, but rather one that uses multidimensional criteria, taking into account the complexity of development processes and the heterogeneous nature of countries. Peru's path is the path to development. We will continue to firmly adopt the good practices that allow us to be an efficient, modern, transparent, and effective state, which provides quality services to all of our people, taking into account future generations. We have made much progress, but much remains to be done. And as a country that is both provider and receiver of international cooperation, we believe that this is a crucial tool to close gaps. President, since July 2018, Peru has been the pro tempore president of the Pacific Alliance. This is a mechanism for economic coordination and profound cooperation and integration, which brings together Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Peru. The alliance now has 55 observer states from the 5 continents, and it has significant interlinkages with international organizations and blocs such as ASEAN, Mercosur, and others with specific development projects. The Pacific Alliance would like to further boost its relations with observer states, and I would like to here reiterate our invitation to the first technical forum for cooperation of this mechanism. This will be held in Lima, the capital of Peru, on the 23rd and 24th of April 2019. This will be a first opportunity at which we will see a portfolio of offers and requests for cooperation that underscore the dual role of the Pacific Alliance. In closing, I would like to renew our commitment to build consensuses which reaffirm the scope, quality, and impact of South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation, and allow us to further promote the implementation of the 2030 Agenda, including the appropriate channeling of available financial resources through specific policies and measures, and the strengthening of a global partnership for sustainable development under the principle of leaving no one behind. Thank you very much.
I thank His Excellency Nestor Popologio Bardeles, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Peru, for his statement. Now I have the privilege to invite His Excellency Datu Saifuddin bin Abdullah, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Malaysia, to make his statement. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. President, Excellencies, Salam Sejahtera. I would like to congratulate you, Mr. President, and members of the Bureau on your respective appointments and record Malaysia's appreciation to the government of Argentina for the successful hosting of this meeting. We are gathered here today because of our beliefs and commitments to the South-South cooperation. Malaysia fully aligns itself with the statement made by His Excellency Foreign Minister of the State of Palestine on behalf of Group 77 in China, and the statement that will be made by Honorable Representative of Thailand on behalf of ASEAN. Mr. President, we are gathered here during an increasingly challenging period. On the one hand, democracy is facing a backlash, among others, with the rise of ultra-nationalism. Globalization is facing discontents and fails to fulfill the promises of improved economic growth and a level playing field for all. On the other hand, the world's economic center of gravity is shifting from the west to the east, from the Atlantic region to the Pacific region. I am reminded of the discourse on these themes by many scholars and leaders. It is in this context that the SDGs is an important framework for a better world. We should take advantage of the SDGs as a platform for increasing connections, greater cooperation, and deeper collaboration. We can work together in many areas, including new technological frontiers, for example, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, quantum computing, smart cities, renewable energy, and Industrial Revolution 4.0. At the same time, we should be mindful of the consequences of unrestrained development. For example, there are environmental implications that comes with major constructions and transportation projects. Cooperation among developing countries and between developing countries with developed countries should be based on principles of good governance, which leads to mutual long-term development benefits, not elements such as lopsided contracts, bad loans, and corrupt deals, which lead to dependency to foreign entities. Cooperation should also be promoted and motivated towards democratization, freedom, human rights, the rule of law, transparency, accountability, and equality. The current international order is exploited by the rich at the expense of the poor. A number of developing countries are faced and sometimes forced with acute levels of debt, sacrificing the well-being of its people. Let us be reminded of what was said by Christine Lagarde, the managing director of IMF, last year. While she noted the potential benefits of mega projects, she cautioned that unscrupulous ventures can also lead to problematic increase in debt, potentially limiting other spending as debt servicing rises and creating challenges in balance of payment. Countries could end up with a sovereign default and be at the mercy of creditors. Another issue is that there are countries and regions that claim to champion universal values but practice unfair trade, protectionism, and double standards. One example is how Malaysia's palm oil industry is facing discriminatory regulations by the EU. The SDGs is a timely framework that can provide answers to the issues that I have just raised. I call on all of us to the idea that human being is entitled to full dignity, irrespective of his or her background. Hence, we must strive to realize the three fundamental values enshrined in the SDGs, i.e. equity, sustainability, and freedom. Malaysia is committed to support and implement the SDGs. The SDGs are embedded in the 11 Malaysia Plan for 2016 to 2020. In this connection, Malaysia reaffirms its commitment to continue supporting capacity enhancements for developing countries through the sharing of expertise and development experiences under the framework of the Malaysian Technical Cooperation Programme, MTCP. Since its inception in 1980, more than 33,000 participants from 144 countries have participated and benefited from the program, and another 1,000 participants will be participating in the MTCP activities this year. Finally, let us differentiate between the smokes of public relations and the fires of sustainable development. Let us make our cooperation real. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Doy las gracias al excelentísimo.
I would like to thank His Excellency Dato Saifuddin bin Abdullah, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Malaysia. I now give the floor to His Excellency José Condungua Antonio Pacheco, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Mozambique.
Your Excellency, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the government of the Republic of Mozambique, I would like to thank the government and people of Argentina for the hospitality afforded to us since our arrival in this beautiful city of Buenos Aires, express our great appreciation for hosting this historical and important event. At this special moment in which we celebrate the 40th anniversary of the United Nations Conference on Technical Cooperation among Developing Countries, which to adopt the Buenos Aires Plan of Action, I would like to acknowledge the significant role that Argentina has been playing in strengthening South-South cooperation. This event is of paramount importance as it fits in with the spirit of multilateralism, seeking to strengthen the partnership in the framework of South-South and triangular cooperation for the ultimate purpose of mobilizing adequate resources for developing countries to achieve sustainable development. It is our conviction that adoption and implementation of the Global Development Instrument, such as 2020 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the Paris Agreement, among others, represent a step forward in this handover. In this junction, the theme chosen for this conference is timely as it reminds us of the fundamental need to revigorate the commitment made in the Buenos Aires Plan of Action for promoting and implementing technical cooperation among developing countries, making the South-South cooperation an indispensable mechanism toward our common and ambitious purpose to achieve sustainable development goals. The commitment outlined in the draft outcome document of this conference need to be operationalized by all of us in order to fulfill the noble goals of advancing together and leaving no one behind. Mozambique recognizes particularly the critical role that triangular cooperation has played over the years, adding significant impetus and value to South-South cooperation through the greater engagement of development partners. Nevertheless, we equally recognize the prevailing challenges in many developing countries, particularly African nations, due to inadequate funding to scale up social and economic investment and limited scope for access to technology to prevent natural disasters, among other factors that underpin the economic transformation where we are pursuing. The multifaceted challenge of the contemporary era requires from us concerted effort to strengthening South-South cooperation, thereby leveraging the resources available to developing countries to better address the 2020 Sustainable Development Agenda. Mozambique's government five-year economic and social development program clearly outlined the promotion of South and triangular cooperation, as well as a mobilization of resources to implement national development agenda as a priority action. This 5-year program established agriculture, infrastructure, energy, and tourism as 4 main pillars for governance. In this sense, I would like to seize this opportunity to thank to share Mozambique's experience in the palpable result arising from the operationalization of South-South cooperation, both as funding and technology transfer and knowledge exchange. On one of the areas that has received greater focus on South-South cooperation initiative is the key sector of agriculture, which is indeed the backbone of our economy, contributing about 24% to the GDP and employing as much as 70% of Mozambican population. As a case in point, Mozambique became the first African country to install China-funded Agriculture Technology Demonstration Center, wherein Mozambicans and Chinese experts have been working side by side to boost the productivity of agriculture in Mozambique. This particular experience stands out for its regular reach out and interaction with local farmers, which allows direct learning and adoption of new technologies. Another increasingly prominent actor of South and triangular cooperation in Mozambique is Brazil. Most recently, Brazil co-funded, alongside with the UNDP and DFID, the building and fitting of the first breast milk bank in the country. The project included the promotion of training activities and Brazilian technology transfer, and marks an unprecedented progress in Mozambique's effort toward reducing maternal, neonatal, and child mortality. The third case is that of Vietnam, whose support helping increase threefold productivity level in rice and vegetables. In conclusion, I would like to reaffirm Mozambique's commitment to continue to associate itself with the goal effort to promote the South and triangular cooperation with a view to boosting the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals for national development and eradicating poverty in all its manifestation and dimension. I thank you for your attention.
Doy las gracias.
I thank the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Mozambique for his statement. Before continuing with the next speaker, I would like to inform the various delegates that we will continue with the general debate until 2:15, and thank you very much to the interpreters for accepting this extension. I now give the floor to His Excellency José Valencia, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Human Mobility of Ecuador.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to begin by thanking and congratulating the Argentinian government for hosting this second high-level United Nations conference on South-South cooperation. 4 decades have passed since, in this same city, 130 member states of the United Nations adopted by consensus the Buenos Aires Plan of Action to promote and implement technical cooperation among developing countries. Since then, the international scenario has undergone profound transformation, particularly with regard to the distribution of global power. In these 40 years, we have transitioned towards an increasingly multipolar world, just as we have seen the advance of globalization. In this context, many of the traditional paradigms of the international cooperation for development system have been broken down in light of a more complex, heterogeneous, and interdependent reality, which poses the challenge of redefining mechanisms and methodologies, taking into account the emergence of new and active political, economic, social, cultural, environmental, gender, and technical stakeholders. South-South cooperation has been relevant to allow us to share experience, information, lessons learned, and above all, to grow together in crafting and implementing public policies and effective development strategies. But we have also seen significant changes that must be borne in mind as we tackle the challenge of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. One topic that has been at the heart of the debate on the 2030 Agenda and on South-South and triangular cooperation is that of middle-income countries. Now, with regard to Latin America and the Caribbean, the vast majority of countries in this region fall into this category. This is measured according to the level of income per capita, the main criteria used to earmark financial resources for cooperation for development. The ECLAC believes that this way of measuring sidelines middle-income countries and that the international cooperation system, in addition to including low-income countries, must consider the very diverse needs and vulnerabilities of middle-income countries, whose most pressing problem is the persistent high levels of inequality. To overcome these limitations and make headway in achieving the 2030 Agenda, we still require the support of international cooperation, particularly given the significant decline in official development assistance. Against this backdrop, one of the greatest challenges faced by countries in the region, including Ecuador, is that of funding, specifically with regard to the development of initiatives that could contribute to achieving the SDGs. Here, we have begun to work on identifying mechanisms for funding to manage a specific fund which promotes the implementation of South-South cooperation initiatives in order to ensure that this mechanism can be further boosted and expand in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2030 Agenda concerns us all, but there are specific matters for some countries and regions that need to be addressed with the same expediency. Now, with regard to Latin America, Central America and the Caribbean, one of these is the waves of migration which have led to unprecedented scenes in our region. With regard to our country specifically, we have faced the migration of Venezuelan citizens who, in the absence of a regular migratory and labor status, have become an extremely vulnerable population. This is a cross-border global crisis which mainly concerns the Latin American region, but also falls to the international community. To better address this, the Ecuadorian government took the initiative of convening 2 international technical meetings in September and November last year, with the participation of 12 countries in the region and the support and the technical advice of the International Organization for Migration and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. The 3rd meeting in this series is already being prepared. In so doing, Ecuador is hoping to meet Target 7 of Goal 10 of the Sustainable Development Agenda, facilitating migration and orderly, secure, regular and responsible migration of persons through the implementation of planned and well-managed migratory policies. Ecuador, together with the IOM and the UNHCR, are holding, in the context of this meeting, a side event to inform about our national proposals that we have crafted in this regard and that I've just mentioned. I would invite all of you to visit this space and this meeting and to enrich our actions with your contributions. In the region, we have bolstered synergies among countries implementing South-South and triangular cooperation as a part of their foreign policy strategies. I'm referring to Latin America and the Caribbean. Here we have reference points such as countries which are Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Mexico, and Uruguay, partners with whom Ecuador has shared successful experiences and good practices in strengthening our institutions. 4 decades on, many of the suggestions and strategic aims set out in the Buenos Aires Plan of Action continue to be particularly relevant. But the changes that we have seen at a global, regional, and even national level mean that we must broaden and democratize the structures and mechanisms of international cooperation in order to make our interventions more effective. As noted by the Ibero-American Secretary General, this has become a forum of vital importance for our region in order to ensure that the new development agenda can be achieved holistically and it does not become an expression of mere desire. We must further the development of capacities and institutional mechanisms and make progress in coordinating policies at all levels. We are sure that this meeting will constitute and does constitute an invaluable opportunity to move from mere hopes to forge a consensus-based roadmap, which brings together our efforts towards effectively bolstering multilateralism and cooperation among the countries here in order to achieve joint growth and development, both purposes clearly enshrined in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you very much to all of you. I'd like to thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Human Mobility of Ecuador for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Bambang Brojonegoro, Minister of National Development Planning of Indonesia.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by thanking the government of Argentina for hosting this high-level conference. I further commend the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation and other stakeholders for organizing this important forum. I would like to associate Indonesia's statement with the statement of G77 and China, and also Association of Southeast Asia Nation, or ASEAN. Mr. President and delegates, the global landscape has changed since the BAPA was launched 40 years ago. Nonetheless, BAPA has been a key platform for the global South to mutually support and engage in solidarity in respective developmental efforts. It is timely for us to reassert technical cooperation that has evolved to be the South-South and triangular cooperation in the context of achieving the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development Goals. Indonesia believes that South-South cooperation as a manifestation of solidarity among developing countries in line with the spirit of 1955 Asian-African Conference continues to remain relevant. Moreover, the solid partnership between South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation have been effective in supporting developing countries to meet their development needs. Indonesia's commitment to strengthen South-South and triangular cooperation has been an important element in its medium-term development plan 2020-2024 as Indonesia continues to align all SDGs targets and indicators to achieve Agenda 2030. Within the framework of non-aligned movement, Indonesia has also hosted the Non-Aligned Movement Center for South-South Technical Cooperation as an information hub and effective means for networking among developing countries. Currently, Indonesia is preparing policy and institutional instruments needed to establish one gate management of South-South cooperation to improve the implementation of South-South cooperation in Indonesia. Mr. President and distinguished delegates, allow me to offer several ways forward to further strengthen South-South and triangular cooperation. First, South-South cooperation is a partnership among equals based on solidarity. South-South cooperation has evolved into international development cooperation aimed at supporting the quality of economic growth for the benefit of the involved countries. Despite its growing role, South-South cooperation should not be seen as official development assistance. Its measurement should be built on gathering evidence and capitalizing knowledge about best practices and supporting specific needs of the countries. Second, enhance resources and improve coordination. We believe that it is important to mobilize sufficient resources to promote and strengthen South-South and triangular cooperation. In this context, we need to continue exploring innovative financing models, including from private sector. We recognize the important role of the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation in coordinating, promoting, and mainstreaming South-South and triangular cooperation, and call on the office to continue providing support for member states to build partnership and enable the sharing of good practices and experiences. It is also important to develop country-led systems to evaluate and assess the quality and impact of South-South cooperation programs while bearing in mind the specific principles and unique characteristics of South-South cooperation. Third, participation of multi-stakeholders. Achieving results and accelerating progress toward the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development call for partnership with and contribution from diverse stakeholders. We believe that multi-stakeholder partnership will unlock the huge potential of South-South triangular cooperation and bring maximum benefits to the Southern people. We need a range of mechanisms or creative instruments to enhance partnership with all stakeholders at the national, regional, and global levels. In this context, Indonesia has developed a guideline for multi-stakeholder partnership, which we would be pleased to share with the interested countries. Mr. President and distinguished delegates, I would also like to convey congratulations to all for reaching a consensus on the outcome document of the conference, which we believe will be a solid base to further advance and strengthen South-South and triangular cooperation in the years to come. Indonesia, in this regard, would like to reaffirm that South-South and triangular cooperation will continue to be important elements in Indonesia's engagement to support global development efforts, particularly the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank the Minister of National Development Planning of Indonesia for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Richard Sezibera, Minister for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Rwanda.
Corrección. Doy ahora.
Correction. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Sahar Ahmed Mohamed Abdelmonaim Nasser, Minister of Investment and International Cooperation of Egypt.
Your Excellencies, Heads of State, distinguished ministers, development partners, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first start by thanking the people of Argentina for the warm welcome under the leadership of His Excellency President Macri and for bringing us here all together in Buenos Aires. This second UN high-level conference on South-South cooperation is an excellent platform for expanding the horizon of joint and mutual cooperation at a unique gathering of leaders, decision makers, and development partners, as well as representatives of regional and international development organizations, boosting multi-stakeholders engagement in an action-oriented approach. Reflecting on the South-South space, we have a lot to share, not just the common aspiration among our people or the unified vision of our nations and leaders, but also common development challenges. In that context, our countries have embarked on ambitious and economic reform program with a key pillar of a social reform agenda. We have a lot of experiences to share and an opportunity to tap on these lessons learned. A key pillar of these reforms was boosting economic and regional integration, where strengthening South-South cooperation is crucial. Let me pre-assert Egypt's commitment to South-South cooperation. We believe that the areas and venues of cooperation are wide, ranging from climate change, digital transformation, infrastructure connectivity, agricultural development, water resource management, and governance, as well as investing in human capital, education, and healthcare services. Empowering youth and job creation through SMEs development and supporting startup and entrepreneurship has been a priority and has been put forward on our developmental agenda. As we are celebrating this month's Women's Day, women economic and social and political empowerment is a priority. It is not just an obligation for gender mainstreaming as highlighted today, this morning in the opening, but it is also smart economics. Our nations have invested in young girls, and hence they need to be given an equal opportunity to participate actively in the economic sphere in our nations. Empirical evidence indeed has proven, as the Secretary General highlighted today, that this ensures better spending on families and children, and effective social safety net put in place. All this would help us in achieving the Sdgs and in attaining inclusive and sustainable growth for our countries. Ladies and gentlemen, in Egypt, His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, has put a grand vision for Egypt and has urged us to work very closely with our other developing and emerging economies, and especially put a lot of emphasis on South-South cooperation, believing in the importance and the effectiveness of the mobilization of expertise and the best use of our resources, with the objective of promoting joint action and attaining tangible and sustainable development impact, and in also achieving the SDGs. Over the past year, Egypt has embarked on an ambitious and multifaceted economic and social reform program, which resulted in a more conducive and enabling environment for both domestic and foreign investments, whilst promoting alongside the principle of good governance across all sectors with the ultimate objective of leaving no one behind. These sectors have contributed to the overall improvement of the country's economic indicators and also reflected in the credit ratings, as evidently reported by international institutions. This would not only be achieved at all without the effective South-South cooperation that we are really committed to. Sharing international best practices and experiences in the area of development and reforms among countries of the South is vital, taking stock of success stories, but also learning from our pitfalls. To that end, we were honored to organize several multi-stakeholders events to exchange these experiences. In July 2018, Egypt has organized and hosted the Cairo Workshop on South-South Cooperation, where countries shared their experiences on existing mechanisms for triangular cooperation. In December of the same year, Egypt hosted the African 2018 Forum, where stakeholders from the African countries agreed on an action plan to attract and promote more private sector investment, foster cooperation, and encourage private sector engagement in the developmental agenda. Moreover, the joint economic committees with Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Eastern European countries plays an important role in stimulating investments and trade ties, promoting economic and commercial integration. The South-South Development Academy in Egypt that was established in partnership with one of our main partners, the UNDP, is another excellent example of that. Ladies and gentlemen, Egypt's chairmanship of the African Union in 2019, this year, comes at the accumulating of its efforts in promoting cooperation and also in consolidating African relationships. We are confident that this year, in partnership and in effective coordination with all African countries, will witness significant advancement to the long-standing historic cooperation among African countries to serve as a live and effective example of South-South cooperation. And we here call for all our development partners to also join forces and help us in achieving that. As His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi stated in his speech at the opening ceremony of the 32nd African Union Summit, quote, "Our common understanding and mutual respect are the great driving forces that give us, countries of the South, the opportunity to deepen and strengthen our common actions towards a better future, a future that aims to promote a prosperous life for our future generations, which is the main purpose we all devote our work and efforts to. I hereby call on the international institutions to further expand the scope of their support to promote more South-South cooperation, while putting the developmental agenda for the developing and emerging economies as a priority on that. I would like to extend to you all my sincere greetings once again, confident that this conference will immensely contribute to the support and enhancement of the South-South cooperation and the well-being of our future generations. Thank you all.
I would like to thank the Minister of Investment and International Cooperation of Egypt for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Theodore Brent Simonet, Minister of Financial Services, Trade and Industry, and Immigration of the Bahamas.
Mr. President, heads of government, heads of state, fellow ministers, officials of the United Nations and other international delegations, distinguished government officials, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is an honor for the Bahamas delegation to participate in this auspicious conference that is convened to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the Buenos Aires Plan of Action for promoting and implementing technical cooperation among developing countries. It would be remiss of me to not express my appreciation of my delegation and myself to the government of Argentina for hosting this conference and for the courtesies extended to my delegation during our stay here in the wonderful city of Buenos Aires. Mr. President, South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation significantly contribute to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and to achieving the overarching goals of eradication of poverty in all its forms and manifestations. The architecture of South-South cooperation encapsulates the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that balances the three dimensions of sustainable development: the economic, social, and environmental. South-South cooperation enables developing countries to achieve cooperation and collaboration within a partnership of equals. It is propitious, therefore, that we return to this beautiful city of Buenos Aires to commemorate the 40th anniversary of this partnership of equals. It is in this place where global efforts of South-South cooperation were catalyzed. We also note that the scheduling of events to illustrate best practices and success stories of the Global South, including the annual observance of the United Nations Day of South-South Cooperation and the convening of the Global South Development Expo 2018 under the theme Showcasing Institutions Supporting South-South and Triangular Cooperation. These projects should be maintained in addition to intensifying the drive to effectively ensure private sector involvement. Mr. President, over the next few days, my delegation looks forward to engaging in various programmed events aiming at procuring and promoting avenues for attaining development finance, access to capacity building, and technical assistance initiatives, as well as the facilitation of knowledge exchange and the networking opportunities. We note the pivotal role of the United Nations Office of South-South Cooperation in further advancing and strengthening South-South and triangular cooperation. We also applaud the directive of the United Nations Secretary General, who has mandated the office to facilitate the formulation of a UN system-wide South-South cooperation strategy. This is essential to the improved efforts of effectiveness, coherence, coordination, and complementary to the activities of support of South-South cooperation. Also, the comprehensive work and the advocacy characters of the regional commissions towards advancing South-South cooperation cannot be overlooked. It is noted, however, that in pursuance of the strengthening of the South-South cooperation mechanism, it is imperative that countries of the Global South, especially small island developing states, continue to advocate for there to be a predictable and sustainable funding and resources for UN programming, and especially for UN departments that are responsible for the implementation of the Samoa Pathway and other developmental frameworks. We also call upon additional institutional support and creation of an innovative mechanisms in the area of climate change and disaster risk management. Cooperation in knowledge sharing and capacity building in disaster mitigation, adaptation, and resilience building, as well as access to climate change financing, remains a priority of SIDS, and especially for nations like the Bahamas. Our commitment to disaster risk reduction and addressing climate change, as outlined in the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015-2030, remain a priority. Mr. President, I think you've heard several times before, access to middle-income countries to developmental financing and climate financing in support of national development plans and objectives is a key goal. In our view, international public finance is still a powerful tool for complementing middle-income countries' efforts to mobilize public resources domestically to achieve sustainable development. Mr. President, as a middle-income country, and in reference to commitments made in the Addis Ababa Action Plan for Financing, the Bahamas calls on the United Nations to work with international financial institutions in the development of a transparent measures to access sustainable development and the country's perceived wealth beyond merely looking at per capita income figure. In this connection, the Bahamas calls for there to be established timelines for international financial institutions for the recognition of an alternate criteria to the per capita income as an assessment of a country's developmental and the country's eligibility for concessionary financing. Essentially, the acceleration of momentum towards acceptance of a vulnerability index and poverty index is essential. We look forward to more direct consultation in this regard with international financial institutions and other entities undergoing these reviews. Mr. President, we reaffirm the South-South cooperation is complement to and not a substitute for North-South cooperation. South-South cooperation is the manifestation of solidarity among peoples of the countries in the South, building on their needs, experiences, and capabilities, diversified culture, and many other circumstances. It should continue to be guided by the principles of respect for national sovereignty, national ownership, and independence, equality, non-conditionality, and mutual benefit. I wish to conclude by reiterating the commitment of the Bahamas government and the people to heighten our endeavours to support UN-led and other multilateral and bilateral partnerships under the framework of South-South cooperation. Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
I'd like to thank the Minister of Financial Services, Trade and Industry and Immigration of the Bahamas for his statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Sultan bin Saad Al Maraiki, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs of Qatar.
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, peace be upon you. At the outset, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to Argentina for its hospitality and the excellent organization of this conference. I would like to commend the efforts of the permanent representative of Lithuania and Uganda for facilitating the intergovernmental negotiations that led to the adoption of the outcome document. Qatar participated in those negotiations. Ladies and gentlemen, we come together today at the same place where we adopted the Buenos Aires Action Plan 40 years ago to enhance South-South cooperation. We come together again to renew our commitment to continue South-South cooperation, which is of paramount importance in light of the great challenges that we're all confronted with. We need more cooperation, we need more coordination to achieve development and prosperity for our peoples. In light of the changes we're witnessing in the international order, the increasing challenges to create an international environment conducive to economic growth, we need a comprehensive review. We need to adopt clear stances that guarantee our interests, that guarantee that we can positively contribute to the eradication of poverty. This is why our conference today is a unique opportunity to review the lessons learned and to assess the achieved progress and to move forward to enhance the investment in our cooperation and to strengthen our cooperation to overcome the different challenges we're confronted with, so that we're able to achieve the Sustainable Development Agenda and identify a vision for the future. We are committed to multilateral coordination. We believe that the countries of the South can play a significant role in the international arena. South-South cooperation is vital for all our countries. We need to exchange expertise, technical expertise. We need to exchange experiences among the countries of the South. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, the agenda for South-South cooperation is a main pillar in the foreign policy of Qatar. This is manifested in many steps we have taken to respond to aspirations of the countries of the South. Doha has become a platform of the countries of the South and the United Nations to achieve cooperation, to ensure respect of the rule of law, and to achieve development. We have provided humanitarian and technical assistance in the framework of the South-South cooperation at the international level. The State of Qatar hosted in 2005 the second South-South summit that led to the adoption of the Doha Action Plan. We've also hosted many other events on South-South cooperation. In 2009, we've held the Conference of South-South Cooperation. at the opportunity of the 30th anniversary of the South-South Cooperation Conference. Qatar also hosted the first Arab conference on development between the countries of the South in 2014. We are committed to enhancing cooperation between the countries of the South to achieve the common interests. We are a partner with a number of countries of the South. In 2008, we organized a conference on the review of the Monterey Consensus. Ladies and gentlemen, the countries of the South are faced with multiple challenges. This means that cooperation is of paramount importance. We must abide by the common principles of this group, the principles enshrined in international law and United Nations Charter. We must enhance friendly relations between countries. You must refrain from interfering in domestic affairs of countries. If we do not abide by these principles, we'd be confronted with more challenges that would obstruct the developing countries from achieving their aims. It is regrettable that some countries are ignoring those principles. They're adopting policies that are against members of this group in order to achieve illegitimate goals. This is not in line with the Charter of the United Nations and the international law. There are violations of the principles that the countries of the South are fighting for. This is why we stress once again that it is important to abide by the principles of common work, of common action that the countries of the South have formulated. Any measures that harm other countries should be stopped. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency, our vision in Qatar towards multilateral relations is based on our conviction that we're confronted with the same challenges, that we have the same destiny, the same fate. South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation in the fields of development will play a great role in achieving the Sdgs. We're convinced that it is important to share the burden. This is why the State of Qatar committed to provide multi-year assistance to provide $500 million to United Nations agencies. This would be earmarked to accelerate the implementation of the Sdgs. In conclusion, Mr. President, the State of Qatar renews once again its commitment to the principles of cooperation and partnership to overcome challenges, to move forward in the implementation of 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. We are committed to contribute to enhance South-South cooperation, to reflect the political will embodied by our conference today. We will continue with our efforts, and we support the outcome document as added value to our conference. I thank you all for your attentions. May the peace of God be upon you.
Doy las gracias al ministro de Estado.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Maldives for his statement. Distinguished delegates, we have just heard from the last speaker in the general debate for this meeting. Before adjourning this first meeting, I would like to announce that the following co-presidents have been appointed for the interactive roundtables of this conference. For the first roundtable on comparative advantages and opportunities of South-South cooperation and the exchange of experiences, best practices and success stories, the Dr. Saha Ahmed Mohamed Abdel Munaim Nasser, Minister for Investment and International Cooperation of the Arab Republic of Egypt, and His Excellency Abdul Haram, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bangladesh. For Roundtable 2, entitled Challenges and Strengthening of the Institutional Framework for South-South Cooperation and Triangular Cooperation, His Excellency Bambang Brodnegoro, Minister of National Development Planning of Indonesia, and His Excellency Santiago Chavez, Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ecuador. And for interactive panel discussion 3, entitled Scaling Up of the Means of Implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in Support of South-South Cooperation and Triangular Cooperation, Her Excellency Diene Keita, Minister for African Cooperation and Integration of the Republic of Guinea, together with His Excellency Marc-André Blanchard, Permanent Representative of Canada to the United Nations in New York. I would like to remind delegations that the second plenary meeting of the conference, in which we will continue with our general debate, will begin at 3 p.m. in this same room. The meeting is adjourned.